Welcome everybody to another episode of StockCenter. We're going to be focusing on the cannabis industry again. We did bit of an intro to the cannabis industry last week, and we can go a little bit more in depth this week. This week we're going to have these three main speakers, along with a possible other couple others that might join and come up to speak. If anybody's, you like work at a cannabis dispensary or something, and you want to come up to speak, shoot me a DM, and we'll get some insight there. But yeah, we're going to kick right off into it. So, Jason, I'm really excited, to have you on here. In addition to these two other guys, all of you have incredible backgrounds in the cannabis industry, which is just a booming industry right now. You're the self-proclaimed world's foremost authority on pot stock sentiment, and I'm honestly all about social sentiment. That's what I love to look at and see where it's going. So, I would love to hear from you a little bit about how did you get into being the Wolf of Weed Street? What was that like? When did you first start looking at the cannabis industry? And what is your main focus on it now? And you're the owner of marijuana stocks as well. So what's that like?
Oh, okay. Well, first, thanks for having me. Um, I've been actively investing in the cannabis industry since 2013. To kind of put it in perspective, I could tell you the day that I wondered to myself out loud if pot stocks were a thing, and that was August 15th, 2013, when then Attorney General Eric Holder gave a speech about how the DOJ was going to leave states that had marijuana laws on the books, as long as they followed, specific guidelines. Um, you know, so like a lot of people, I was like, well, is this a thing? I went to Google and typed in pot stocks, and it brought me to this website, which was ended up being marijuanastocks.com, which I ended up buying a year. Um, and really just kind of had no idea, bought my first penny stock, which I'd never done before, for like $500, and it went up 50% in 2 days. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then it dropped 50%. And the volatility really excited me. That's really how it started. Back then, there was no way. There was no information out there. There was like people on Seeking Alpha. Um, there was people on Seeking Alpha that um, sorry, my office just my son just ran into my office.
Yeah, no worries. It's the hazards of working from home.
Yeah, so there was really nobody out there giving any kind of information. So I had to really just read a bunch of cesspools, Yahoo message boards, iHub, Twitter. I didn't even know anything about cash tagging. But I started to kind of do my own intel, and I was just kind of like, all right, before saying picks and shovels was cool. That was the first thing I went for. And I did what every person that invests in the sector, invests in the market should never do, is I put all my eggs in one basket. And that basket ended up going like 1,000%. And, this was as Colorado was going legal. And then, I was home one night and I saw a trailer for Wolf of Wall Street. And I thought, oh, Wolf of Weed Street, that'd be a clever name. I can talk shit about all of these scammy companies that I'm like running into. And really, that's how it started. And then it just turned into, because intelligence was so hard to come by, I started asking people, hey, do you live in Denver? Hey, do you live here? I'll PayPal you like $100 if you can go and see if this is a PO box. If it's a real company, can you ask these questions? And it started like that. And then it just kind of took on a life of its own. And because I'd been really looking at the sector so hard, um, for so long, like, I had a pretty good idea of the animal spirits that were just kind of involved. And look, 2014 was nuts. I mean, people think this. I mean, I got into investments that went up 10,000%. It's a lot like the crypto craze right now. Um, but just kind of seeing that and everything going on, realizing that it wasn't sustainable and the market was just so undeveloped. I was one of the smarter ones that, took my ball and went home, took my profit, and then started rolling that into, either marijuana, something like marijuanastocks.com or just private investments in the space. And really, that's how I got started. And now, I'd say since 2016, I've been investing in these companies before they go public, which is just, given me a lot of opportunity, as well as actively trading in the sector. So,
So, so what are some of these companies that you got into super early that are now major names?
so like GW Pharma was, like I bought GW Pharma at $32. I bought Cara Therapeutics at I think it was like $5, $4. Um, some other ones, AbbVie under 50. For the biotechs. For the the names that we know now, I'm very, very active in my portfolio. And what a lot of people don't know is, 5 years of my portfolio from, let's say, 2014 to 2018, October of 2018 to be more specific, um, I liquidated 80% of my holdings, going into C45. I even made a calendar a month ahead because I'm like, this thing's just going to pull back. And then I liquidated the rest March of 2019, which everybody said I was stupid for doing, but the whole market ended up tanking, 60, 70%. I didn't get back into the space as a long because I was short until July of 2020. So, you know, that's that's kind of where I'm at. I do have some longer term holdings. I actually sold my GW, sold my AbbVie. So like I'm not holding anything that has, long term capital gains on it. Let's put it that way. And I think that's, something that is really important for people in this space to know. This
Hmm.
isn't something where, like, I hear from so many people like, oh, I'm a long-term investor. 5 year, I'm on a 5 year plan. Yeah. I know a lot of people that were in Aurora that were on the 5 year plan. That stock is never going to get back to where it was, you
Right.
know?
Right.
So
Yeah. Never, never.
yeah, you've got to be active in this space, and you've got to realize that, every one of these companies at some point is going to screw you, or at least you have to be on guard as if that's going to happen. And you really have to have a deep understanding of the history, the price action, the seasonality of this, and an even bigger understanding of the psychology and the sentiment that goes into participating in this market as a hive. And if you can do that, and you can have a very successful career, investing in cannabis.
Absolutely. I've got one more question for you, and then I'm going to go to Zach. Before I do that, though, I just want to thank everybody that's listening, that's joined in. In case you are unfamiliar, my name is Gav Blacksberg, and I'm the COO at Wolf Financial. I love working for Wolf, which is why I put like 10 hours a day into building our Twitter. You can check out Wolf Financial. The link is in my bio. We are building what I think is going to be one of the next great companies. So I'd love to have you all join. It would really help if we got more users to join because we're about to close our first capital raise. So that would be great. On a separate note, my last question for you, Jason, is and then my one other thing is sometimes my spaces have technical difficulties. Thanks, spaces. Sometimes they crash. It be like that. If my space crashes, wait 90 seconds. I will reopen another space. Everyone will come back and the party will keep going. If you're following me, it'll be easier to find that space. Jason, my question for you is, what was it like getting verified with the username Wolf of Weed Street? How did that happen?
I mean, it just kind of happened, right? Um, I had complained a bunch because, there was a lot of people just kind of impersonating me. And by this point, what a lot of people don't know is in 2014, Rolling Stone did a piece on me, which ended up going into Men's Journal. So a 4-page piece. I was in Vice, Forbes. I was even in Penthouse one year. And at that point, it was like, all right, like verify me. I Jordan Belfort's cool with me being, the wolf of Weed Street. I talked to him about it in Vegas, so it really didn't do anything different. It just, being verified, and the other verified people on here can tell you, all it is just, you get to see a different end. But I didn't really look at it as like, oh, like my life changed, anymore. It
Right.
definitely, it doesn't help with my trading. It's like I'm not using it for the dark side. Like, oh, everybody buy this, it's going to the moon. You're never going to hear me say like, you need to buy this or anything. Like I'll say buy the dip, um, but you know that's
Right.
about it.
Right. Absolutely. I appreciate that insight. Also, really cool thing that just happened. So I know a few people that work at Twitter. For those who aren't familiar, I do feedback for Twitter Spaces. So I meet with Twitter, with some of their designers and suggest features and things like that. And Twitter actually just reached out to me and asked if I want to go live from the Twitter Spaces handle. So look out for that sometime over the next week, I hope. I guess I'll be going live from their handle, which has like 300K followers. So that'll be fun. But Jason, thank you so much. We'll have time definitely to come back around with some more questions. But Zach, we got like through the tip of the iceberg in our last call, but you have such a fascinating background. You like name drop Snoop Dogg. You were talking about like everything you've been through. Can you walk us a little bit more through like your journey in the cannabis industry and just what some of the most interesting parts have been for you?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks, Jason. Nice connecting here. I'm curious. I used to write a ton for Playboy and Penthouse, often about the cannabis industry, and I'm actually kind of wondering if one of the stories I wrote included you, but we could talk about that offline. I have been a writer and editor based in New York for 10 years. I've been focusing heavily on the cannabis space probably since like 2015. I used to be a writer and editor, full-time staffer at Vice at .com, the magazine, and I was covering cannabis, particularly like emerging markets and lingering black markets for a long time. And then I quit Vice in late 2016, and in sometime in early 2017, I got involved with Mary Jane, which is Snoop Dogg's cannabis and culture media empire. And from 2017 to 2020, I was overseeing all of editorial while also cranking out features for other publications, typically more longer form reported pieces. And those were for like Playboy, Penthouse, as I said before, a bunch of other spots. And I like to focus specifically on the culture side, and a term I use is called convergence culture, which is like, as technology, well, how does culture exchange and culture commodification evolve as technology and policy evolves concurrently, right? And I also find another huge topic of focus of mine is, some people call it the second economy, but others use the term gray markets, but essentially the relationship between underground and legacy markets and new compliant markets, and the controversies and interesting things that happen when there's a disconnect. So a good example of that is like, Maine has a cannabis legalization program, but retail has been delayed. So you're seeing all these gray market loopholes kind of pop up. And in particular, there's a group of people called Maine's Weed Psychics, where for an $80 fee, a donation, they will quote unquote find your weed for you using magic or their spiritual powers and deliver it to your door. And it's technically legal, even though it is a very generous loophole utilization. So anyway, my fun is now I'm working at Bullish. I'm focused on both video and editorial, and I host a show called Cash Only, which focuses on the second economy. And we recently had Tommy Chong on for 420, and we have some other exciting cannabis guests in the upcoming weeks and months. But yeah,
Awesome.
thank you.
Yeah. So with this writing, you've written about so many of the areas of the industry. You've had the experiences of meeting so many of these people. Can you kind of bring us into maybe some of the more interesting encounters? There's so many
Yeah, totally.
crazy personalities in the cannabis world. I think we'd love to hear maybe about what it's like to be up and close with some of them.
Sure. Two stories come to mind in particular, and none of this is shit talk, but it's also, sometimes a little bit stranger than fiction. I did this 8-page feature for Penthouse in I think 2017 or 2018, which was about the rise of canna celebrities was my term, or like cannabis influencers, which weren't really in the zeitgeist yet. I don't think people like Dabbing Granny, who I think is canceled now, I don't think they were even being talked about or written about. And there was all these people who were starting to get like Instagram sponsorships or brand sponsorships, and really the difference between like a Tommy Chong and a Snoop Dogg and these people was that these people were known for weed specifically. It wasn't like they made music and also smoked weed, or they were making movies about weed. They were known for being consumers. And I found that very interesting. So I did this long reported piece that focused on all these different personalities, including people like Dr. Dina, who inspired the show Weeds, a friend of mine, Dope as Yola, who's one of the bigger cannabis influencers on YouTube. And then at the end of the piece, there's like 1,000-word additional story, which is about Big Mike, who is running arguably one of the biggest ancillary businesses in the cannabis space. His company, I'm blanking off the top of my head. It's like Miracle Grow or Grow Organic. It's a soil and fertilizer company, and he's kind of become the Dan Bilzerian of weed, even though Dan Bilzerian himself is in weed. He's kind of like a larger than life personality who is very keen on his Instagram brands, a lot of yacht photos with models, etc. And he threw this over the top Halloween party that was just like, Google the term weed party and everything that you could think of would come up. Like fire breathers, open flower bars, on and on and on, just like every over the top aspect for a party you could imagine. And it ended up at the peak of the party. There was some famous band playing. There's like oysters and lobster everywhere. A helicopter starts flying over the giant mansion where there's like probably 1,000 people on Halloween, all dressed up in weedified costumes. And the party ended up getting raided and busted by the cops with all these people like running down the hills of this Laurel Canyon mansion. And it was just a really good sign of, or maybe symbol of, the difficult balance a lot of these influencers and creators were experiencing at the time of, you can only get so loud before something will blow up in your face. And whether that's a social media platform deleting your following and getting like just restricting your account, or the cops blowing up your party even though it's technically legal, I just found it a really interesting moment that showed the disparity between how people were thinking ahead of branding themselves as thought leaders or personalities in the cannabis space, and then where maybe the legal and municipality zeitgeist was. So yeah, that story of Big Mike's failed Halloween party comes to mind. And I've seen other really successful examples of amazing parties that were branded by cannabis companies, featured all sorts of personalities, and they went off without a hitch. But in 2017, I remember it still being quote unquote risky to have a party with legal on site consumption, even in a state like California.
Very interesting. Um, okay, love that. It's like
And
a cool insight into like the idea of how legality has been changing, right?
absolutely. And that's kind of where I'm focused now with cash only, specifically as the East Coast starts to come on board and legalize. You will see either underground markets swell or evolve or evaporate and change in other ways. And I think it's a really kind of a time capsule moment that people look back at and be like, oh, remember when we get plastic baggies with a bootleg branding on them? So that's kind of where I'm thinking now about how the underground market will be affected on the East Coast, and what will change, what will stay the same, and if these underground players can make it to the legal market, and if they even want to.
Got it. Got it. Absolutely. Thank you for the insight, Zach. We're going to continue to move around, and we'll come back around. So we've
Thank
heard a
you.
little bit, yeah, of course. We've heard a little bit about kind of, Zach's personal experiences, Jason's introduction to this. So Toby, you have like a bit of a different experience here where this past week you, like you said, virtually met with so many of these different companies. I'm sure that you saw a lot of financials, a lot of plans. Floor is yours. Maybe talk us through some of what stood out to you and also to the audience. Again, I would love to take some questions for maybe the second half of this for some of my speakers. So feel free to just go ahead and DM me some questions. And if you can make them specific to, a speaker, that would be great as well. So Toby, all yours.
Awesome. Yeah. So just like I'll give a quick 20-second background. I've been an institutional investor for over 15 years. Primarily, my focus in the past has been on small cap stocks, so stocks kind of under 10 billion in market cap. And a lot of the, most of the public companies are obviously under that in the space. I historically have done, I invest in everything. So across asset classes, across sectors, everything basically. And, I've just been drawn into the cannabis space the last kind of 2 years, particularly the last 1 year since COVID kind of started. Obviously the fundamentals, certain sectors like have benefited from COVID, right? Like, so high growth software, work from home names, et cetera. And cannabis is a sector that also has benefited from COVID. I mean, COVID didn't slow the sector down. Some could actually argue that COVID actually accelerated growth of the sector. I've invested in a lot of things over my career. And this cannabis sector, particularly the US companies, the US focused companies, is the best investment opportunity I've seen in a really, really long time. And part of the reason for that is because it's still federally illegal. So most of the money, a lot of the money that's in the space is actually retail money. There's not that much institutional money in the space yet. And the sector's, pun intended, growing like a weed. I mean, it's the growth is just off the charts. My approach, to the space is definitely a little more, fundamental. I like technical analysis. I like it when people point charts out to me and things like that. But I definitely take more of a fundamental approach to the space. It's very geared towards meeting with management teams. So because of my job, I have pretty good access to conferences and just face-to-face meetings. And obviously, the past year they've all been virtual meetings. But yeah, so it's just kind of getting to know the management teams that head up these companies. I'm a big believer in, like, when you invest in a company, you're backing the management team. So you got to make sure that you're betting on the right jockey, right? And I can tell you that from multiple interactions with all these management teams at the top companies, I think they're all great. I think that, like, whether it's Curaleaf, Green Thumb, Cresco, Trulieve, etc. Those are the four largest U.S. companies. I think the management teams are great, and I think they're going to build very, very big businesses going forward. So just like a little bit of context why I'm very excited about the space. If you kind of like take all the company, like if you take all the public companies, all the public U.S. companies, and you add them all up, like, it's around 50 billion of market cap. Okay, like Dogecoin. I think, Wolf, you actually hosted a Dogecoin space like
Yeah,
a couple of nights ago.
I like to have fun. I've hosted about 6 hours of Dogecoin spaces over the last 3 days, just to fuck around. We got like 800 people in them, so like, who am I to say no?
Yeah, there was one also. Someone else hosted one, and there were like 15,000 or 10,000 people in the room, and Elon popped in for like a
Yeah.
little bit, and So anyways, Dogecoin, right? Like, I'm not a crypto expert, so I'm not going to give an opinion on crypto here, but Dogecoin alone is 70 billion, right? So the amount of money in Dogecoin alone is already more than the amount of money in public U.S. cannabis stocks, right? The growth of the industry is great. The biggest thing is that the institutional players largely cannot invest in the space yet, because it's federally illegal, and because these stocks, all the U.S. companies trade over the counter, which is kind of crazy that you have a company like Curaleaf, which is 10 billion of market cap, generating well over $1 billion of revenue, growing 100%, providing thousands of jobs, like millions of dollars of tax revenue. It's crazy that a company like that, the largest cannabis company in the world by revenue, is actually traded over the counter and can't even get a New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ stock listing yet. And that's the key point, is like yet, right? Because at some point, these names will get uplisted onto a major exchange. I can't tell you exactly when, but at some point they will. And at that point, the capital markets open up and capital flows to companies that have accretive uses for that capital. So the industry is growing super fast. More states are legalizing. I mean, these companies are just they're temporarily a little bit limited by the capital constraints, but the best companies are finding ways around that and finding ways to raise capital and put that capital to work. So yeah, again, like, Tuesday I spent basically a whole day just meeting with, I guess I met with like 8 different companies, including most of the largest ones. And, I mean, obviously, like, look, suffice it to say, like the industry's growing really strongly. Everybody was bullish. The nice thing about this industry too is, like, I know that like a lot of people own, like, high growth software companies, or most other companies that you own, you have to wait 3 months to see the report card, right, for the earnings report. With cannabis, many of these states actually release like monthly sales data. So it's actually like easier to see the growth of the industry on a month by month basis. And some states like Florida actually go beyond that. They actually release like market share data. So you could actually see like which companies are maybe gaining or losing market share in a certain month. So from that perspective, there actually is, I find like there's actually a little bit more visibility into the growth in the space than other sectors.
Interesting. So with that growth, where do you see this going over the next decade?
I mean, my super high level approach to it is I think the industry is going to be minimum $100 billion of sales over the next, call it, like 5 years or so. And I think that's very realistic because currently the industry is already about $100 billion of sales in the US, um, because there's a huge black market. So, I see this market opportunity. Like, the great thing about cannabis is it's not a new product. It's been around for centuries. People have been using this product for centuries. So currently in the US, there's about $100 billion of weed sold every year. Only 20% of that, $20 billion, is through the legal market. So there's an additional 80 billion sold through the black market. So I think that over time, you see two things happen. You see a conversion from the illegal markets to the legal markets. And there's several reasons for that. It's just the legal markets have a wider variety of products, right? Like they have edibles, there's beverages now, there's tinctures, there's vapes, like safe vapes, not vape gate vapes where you might have some health issues. So I think the legal market is going to take market share from the black market, especially as more states legalize. And I do fully believe that this industry, especially the top companies, they're investing in R&D. They're coming out with new innovative products that are driving new consumers to the category. So it's no longer your stereotypical pothead or stoner. I mean, I think the whole stereotype of what a stoner is like so outdated, because like you have everybody from, like billionaires to high performing athletes to grandmas. I like Zach saying the dabbing granny. Like there's just there's no real stoner stereotype anymore. I mean, I think it's a product that everybody can use, that can benefit their life. And so I think that between conversion from the illegal market and developing new products that draw on new consumers, I believe that it's going to be $100 billion industry in sales in, call it, 5 years. And, if you put a 5 times multiple on that, you're talking a $500 billion, industry by market cap. So today, if you add up all the companies, it's about $50 billion. And so I think that, yeah, my bet is that over the next 5 years, you can see the $50 billion grow to approximately 500 billion. I usually tell people, look, it's a 5 to 10x opportunity. I like to be conservative. So conservatively, I'm like saying it's a 5x opportunity, right? That, like, that the market caps can go from 50 billion to 250 billion. But I think that, you know, if we get uplisting, if we get some of these catalysts play out this year, like to Jason's point, like, you know, and he's really good at this, like sentiment, sentiment is so important to understand in space because the stocks move on sentiment more than fundamentals most of the times. If you get some of these catalysts coming up, like regulatory catalysts playing out over the next 12 months, I think it could boost sentiment massively. And if these stocks get uplisted on a major exchange, I mean, yeah, there's going to be some, you know, again, like right now, Curaleaf's the biggest company at a 10 billion market cap. Why couldn't that be a 50 billion market cap, right? Like, I think it's actually reasonable to think that it could be a 5x opportunity over the next couple of years, right? So just because I'm saying the industry is going to grow to $100 billion in 5 years doesn't mean that I think it takes the stocks 5 years to get there, right? Because stocks are discounting mechanisms. People price in what's forward. And especially now, you know, we're in a period where, you know, I mean, market's been choppy lately, but like the past, you know, 6 months, markets have been kind of frothy and people have been pricing growth very strongly. So yeah, so that's kind of my high level pitch to people is I usually say, look, like I'm making a long-term bet on it. I have a little bit more of a buy and hold strategy. Jason definitely does a lot better with kind of the shorter term calls and the options. And I think there's a lot we can learn from him. But at least for me, like I'm definitely more of a, you know, high level, like, look, this industry is going to do really well over the intermediate to long term. And I think it's a great place to invest. It's not a good place to invest for people that need their capital back in the next 1 to 2 months because the space is very volatile. You know, the stocks were up, the US names were up about 40 to 50% from January 1st of this year through February 10th. And then they had a 30% pullback. And now we've like recently kind of started to rally a little bit. I think Jason actually called the bottom of this recent sort of trend pretty well. I think Jason, you were like a day early, but it was like around 420. But you know, so the stocks have kind of bounced since then. I do, like I said, like I work at a fund. I also invest in a lot in real estate. So I'm doing a lot of different things through the day. So I don't have time to like look at my Bloomberg screen like every single minute. So I'm definitely more of a long-term investor in the space, but I do think the space, like I said, is very volatile. So if you have a guy like Jason, or if you want to listen to Jason and learn option strategies, et cetera, like I think you can take advantage of that volatility if you want as well.
Perfect overview. Thank you so much, Toby. I'm going to have our fourth speaker on here speak, and then I have several questions ready from the audience. So I posted what questions / thoughts do you have on the cannabis industry? I already have several great questions on that. Also, I'm going to bring up a couple people to ask questions. I'm not going to just bring up people who request. I don't like to surprise my guests with any ugly questions. So people who DM me questions, I might be comfortable bringing them up to ask that question. That's just how I run it. I'm trying to keep things a little bit organized. But for right now, the last speaker that we have is risk versus reward. And last time you talked about, you know, your passion for the cannabis industry, why you got into it, why you like it. Maybe you could give us just a couple minutes on some of the trades that you've been doing surrounding the industry over the last, couple of weeks.
Yeah. Well, first I gotta ask one question to Jason. I was just really curious because I don't want anyone to misunderstand, or maybe you meant what I heard, but the impression I got was that you were saying that holding long term almost is a bad move. I think maybe you were just saying that, meaning that you're a short term like trader and more momentum, but it sounded like you were saying if you pick, a green thumb or just invest in MSOS long term, you're not recommending that, which I was curious about. Is that true? Did I mishear you?
No, you just didn't understand what I was saying.
Okay. I also came in late. I came in the middle of your.
No. It's fine. I'll just clarify quickly and then let you get to it. I just think that you leave a lot of money on the table if you're doing it that way. And people like to think that I'm like a day trader, which I actually take issue with because I'm not. I'm a long-term investor that just actively maintains a portion of my portfolio in order to let the market pay me to stay long. Mm-hmm. So and Toby can tell you this because we had done a clubhouse before we hit an all-time high, in pot stocks in February, I was like, look, there's going to be we're going to get a pullback, 20-30%. I'm like, nobody's going to be ready for it. I was ready for it. I did a 4-hour webinar on what to do, how to hedge. So now, and I'm able to buy the dip aggressively using house money. So that's what I mean. So you can turn, like I turned a $20,000 position in Aurora in 2016 into a $1.2 million position by being active. If I had just kept the position, it would be worth 240 when I sold it. So that's what I mean.
I got you. You're just saying you can maximize it more. All right. I just want to make sure I got that, because I more similar to Toby, I was going to come from. Look, I'm not a professional in the same way you guys are. I haven't been in the industry as long as you guys have. I don't have the same experience. I'm probably closer to some of the consumers in the crowd, and I'm 23. Just more people that have been around the industry for a little while, but they haven't actually been on the side you guys are. So coming from that retail perspective and just kind of seeing the changes happening, my investment strategy was basically before the election. I knew that if the Democrats were to sweep, no political. This isn't about being Republican, Democratic. It was just about the fact that if they were, I wanted to make sure I was well positioned before that. I hate being the one that's caught chasing, right? So I basically bought all across the industry before it. I bought options. Anything that I could get my hands on that I saw as being a significant opportunity if we went Democratic. I pushed it before the presidential election and again before the Senate. But unlike you guys, I know like Jason, I'm not really trying to do it perfectly. I know that I could probably maximize better, but my kind of thought process is this is not an industry that's an if, it's a when. It's just about when it's going to all unfold the way we're discussing. I don't even think it's a question if it will. And so basically for me, like you guys said, we expect these pullbacks to occur. So, if you were to get in the industry at any time, you get in, you get a position. And when these big pullbacks occur, if you truly have that long-term conviction, that's when you're adding. And so it's not like it sounds so crazy. It's obviously it's what everybody knows. You add when it's add at lows, add on dips. But if you have this long-term perspective, like Zach was mentioning, just how big the industry might get, we are so early that I'm not buying when it's going crazy. I'm buying before the election. Then around 420, just like you, I was adding, but I have a portfolio that's basically I'm never going to touch this portfolio. It's only cannabis stocks. I don't sell in it. I only buy. I definitely am not going to get those same maximized returns that Jason might get. But it's not. I went through the 2018, right? I went through it. I did sell on the way up, but I saw it just how it happened, and I basically didn't want. Yeah, what'd you say?
No, I said gotcha.
Yeah.
Within that though, the last thing was on that. You placed a lot of option trades, and more recently, you still placed a couple option trades on BTI, right? And just because you see that crossover in the cannabis to the weed industry.
Yeah.
So I did just for time, I did bring someone up, if that's okay. Because they had a question they've been waiting for a while, but I am going to circle back around. So Bullflex Daily, you had a question for Jason. Sorry, apologies, long guy. Ask away. Floor is yours.
Yeah, so this is either for Jason or Zach. Doesn't really matter. So what is the path for U.S. companies to actually list on a U.S. national exchange, and where are we now with that? Will the Safe Banking Act be able to do that, or is it just another process that hasn't even really been started yet? And my second question was, are any of these Canadian LPs that are currently on the national exchanges, are they going to actually be taking any market share when they're able to enter the United States? And then the third one would be, I actually don't know too much about this, but I think the cannabis drink industry will be huge if they can be like THC infused. sort of like how I know there's CBD drinks right now, and there was a lot of hype when Canada was going legal. I remember like Canopy talking about how drinks were going to be the future. I don't know of any THC infused drinks right now, and I'm also keep in mind I'm also in Baltimore. We don't have a recreational market at all. Where do we stand with THC infused drinks?
Okay, let me start from the back because that'll be the shortest. So with drinks, the drink market's 1%, a little bit more than 1%. You've got companies like Curaleaf that, in lieu of going with co-packing and bottling, they created Squeeze, which you can dose whatever drink you're drinking. Drink of water, drink of soda, whatever. Apparently it's selling like crazy. That's one way. But I think that the people thinking about that this drink market is like going to be the end all be all holy grail, they are wrong for now. Okay. I mean, I still think you'd be wrong for a while, but don't base your investment off of that strategy. Interstate commerce has to be worked out, okay, in order for that to work. Now, the second question would be about the Canadian LPs. Are they going to be able to gain market share? This, I think, is one of the things that people really get hung up on. Like, oh, Canopy is going to come in and dominate. Sundial is going to dominate. Aphria is going to dominate. The people that tell you that are all holding bags from 2018. You have to realize that these companies are carrying a disgusting amount of debt. All right. They're not going to have the money to come in to the United States and grab market share. And really, if you look at the dichotomy between their earnings and the US companies' earnings, it's night and day. Curaleaf put up 233 million last quarter. Canopy did 155 with I think it was $2.3 a share, like negative. Their margins suck. And also, for everybody in the United States, you guys know, we're protectionists. We're not going to legalize in this country, which is exactly what it would take for them to come in and be like, yes, Canadians, take market share from these U.S. companies. Okay, the only way that they're going to be able to come into this country and do anything meaningful is by proxy of an investment, somewhat like Canopy did through TerraSend and
And is
yada
that
yada
happening
yada.
though with Constellation and Altria though, and like companies taking stakes?
Yeah, what did Altria
They're Kronos. They're taking a
yeah
majority stake in Kronos.
yeah I understand that and it's literally given them nothing. Kronos is literally just its market cap is held up by the fact that they've got $1 billion in cash that's doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They did $6 million in revenue last quarter.
It'll be a nice write-off. It'll be a nice impairment charge. So it'll give them something. It'll give them something.
Right. It's been a complete disaster for them. Aphria bought Sweetwater Brands, which is a company that was on the verge of bankruptcy. So no, I don't think that the Canadians are going to come in. And then for the first one, safe banking. Safe banking does not mean like, oh, okay, we get safe banking, you could uplist. It is a step. It is something in the progression, but there is no language in that bill that it's a custodian issue. And, that's something that Toby could probably speak more of. But, as it goes with safe banking, it's like people ask me, well, don't you want it right now? No, I'd rather safe banking passed in late July when volume is starting to come back to the sector. And at the end of the day, you should want to have more time. And this is going back to what Toby was saying. You should want more time to accumulate, build your positions, because once we do get that uplist, you're going to see the multiples from the Canadian companies shift to the US companies. All right. And you're going to see the true value, because you've got all these people that, all these institutional investors that have to just buy dog shit. And sorry if you don't curse on here, and I
Oh,
apologize, but
I curse a lot on my spaces. Don't
okay.
worry.
But they're forced to buy dog shit. They're forced to buy Aurora. They're forced to buy Canopy. I mean, look, Canopy is good, like as a trade. The company, like, I saw my friend Javier did a piece on Ascend the other day, and he called Tilray and Afria the biggest companies in the world by revenue. Yeah, now they're the biggest companies by debt also, So, I think a lot of these things are going to see the value and the hype, like what is it? Silver Spike, the company that owns Weed Maps. Guys, the day that Silver Spike went public, one of the guys from Weed Maps said, "Don't buy it." I was like, "Yeah, no shit. That thing's not worth $1.2 billion. Are you crazy? It was worth maybe 300, 400 million. You're going to see, like, once the U.S. companies like Curaleaf, GTI, Trulieve come to you're going to see that the emperor has no clothes in Canada. I hope that answered your question.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll just jump in on the safe and uplisting, and like I was saying earlier too, like the space has been volatile on sentiment regarding federal reform, right? So like there's definitely a lot of misperceptions. Like sometimes what investors think they want, you actually don't want, right? So like an extreme example of that is many people, like I know if the headline comes across tomorrow, like Biden supports full massive legalization and decriminalization of cannabis. Obviously, these stocks are going to jump. Like that's actually if you're an investor in the space and you own the top U.S. companies, you actually don't want that. These companies that are at the top of their game, the largest market caps, right? Curaleaf, Cresco, Green Thumb, Trulieve, Verano, etc. Like they're building their businesses on a state by state basis. Because it's federally legal, it's up to the states. So every single company has to grow it in each state because you can't transport cannabis across state lines. They're building strong state by state businesses, and they're doing it even without being able to raise capital, both in the equity and the debt markets, at the same rates that any other company or any other sector could, right? So that's definitely a challenge as a negative. But I think people are underappreciating the fact that, like, right now we've seen, you're still seeing a lot of M&A in the space. So many of the top companies, like I'll use Cresco as an example, or so Cresco bought a company in Massachusetts recently for like 4 times EBITDA. Like if there was federal reform and SAFE happened to like tomorrow and there was free access to capital, there'd probably be less M&A because a lot of those smaller private companies could go out and raise money and they could actually become more competitive. Right now, this environment, the way it's set up right now, actually strongly favors the largest companies, and it's giving the largest companies time to build their competitive moats, and it's also giving them time to pick up smaller private competitors at like dirt cheap valuations. And by the way, they're not actually preying on the smaller competitors because most of these deals, there's a heavy amount of stock component. So from the acquisition targets point of view, it's like, well, I run a chain of like 3 dispensaries in this area. Like, do I really think I'm going to be able to build this into an actual public company? Why don't I just sell to Cresco or to Green Thumb or to one of these other larger public companies, and I'll take stock and I'll go along for the ride? So yeah, to Jason's point, like for me, obviously, I would like to see SAFE sooner than later, but I totally agree with his stance. Like the longer, like if we can get it at a better time of year when there's more volume in the market, that would actually be helpful. But I think that I think capital access is getting easier. Like Green Thumb last week raised debt at a record low 7% interest rate. That's actually still crazy, right? Because they have such a strong financial profile. Any other company, like if I showed you their financials and I didn't say it was a cannabis company, like any bank would have lended to them at like 4%, but they're having to pay 7%. But their previous debt round was like 14%. So they're getting a cheaper cost of debt capital. Cost of equity is still really high in this industry, but it is slowly going down as well. So it's just really interesting because the top companies are performing really well. To Jason's point, like the revenue growth, look at the profits. That's even like after paying massive amounts of taxes. They're performing extremely well, even with all the sort of challenges that they're facing now. So it is a weird thing. Like a lot of investors want to see like massive, full-blown speed action on some of this regulatory stuff. And I do want it as well, but it almost works in your benefit to have it done at a more measured pace. It gives the companies time to build a better business, and it also gives retail investors a chance to accumulate positions. This isn't like, Snowflake went public last year and the stock popped, 100%? And guess who got rich? All the funds that had invested in Snowflake beforehand and all the hedge funds that got the nice allocation at the IPO price. And then retail investors are having to pay 100% premium the day it starts trading. Cannabis is actually kind of the opposite now. Like the institutional guys are actually, most of them can't invest in the space, but the retail investors can. Once we do get uplisting, and again, I don't know the timing of it, but I'm a strong believer that it will happen. That's when the institutions can come into the space, and they will be buying these names, and they actually are going to go like the largest names first, right? Like they're not going to go buy the $100 million microcap that has like a presence just in Florida. They're going to buy Curaleaf, Green Thumb. They're going to buy the biggest names first. And this is a great setup for retail investors to be able to get their positions, to accumulate positions in the stocks before the institutions can.
Absolutely. Very, very insightful. And I actually do have a couple of questions from the audience, just rapid fire real quick. Zach, I want to throw these to you because it's been a second. Feel free to say pass on any of these, but they're just questions from the audience. I figured I'd throw them out there. Maui Wowie or OG Kush? I can't hear him. Oh, yeah, I can hear you now, Zach.
Hey, OG Kush for life. I think those who know and the knows are going to go for OG, and which is kind of considered like the California classic if we're talking flower. Kind of piggybacking off of things both Toby and Jason said before. Something I just want to bring up, and I feel like hasn't been addressed. Currently in California, the underground legacy market is.
Did he just get kicked for anyone else?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was kicked.
Rough. All right. Spaces removed you. I'll send him that real quick. But if he joins back, I'll throw him back up here.
Yeah, I know what he was going to say.
Yeah.
The black market in California is crazy, and I think it's also one of the reasons why you don't see a real big presence of the U.S. public companies. Like I know people in California that sell weed illegally and grow it. So it's like people ask me if I want to buy a grow. I'm always like, in California, I'm like, nah, I'm stay just avoid
And they can sell
that
it on
place.
weed maps too now, Jason. They're on weed maps too.
Yeah, well, that's why weed maps is so awful. Like a lot of people don't realize there's an active DOJ investigation into them.
Yeah.
So I just brought up another person from the audience because they've been requesting to speak the entire time. Well, we'll see if it works. That's Wolf of NM. They have a question for you, Jason. I don't know why I keep saying Jacob. God damn it. So if they come up, they'll ask it. But if not, we'll see what happens. The other question I'm going to throw over to you, Jason. Feel free to pass also. Another question for the audience was favorite munchies.
Cadbury cream eggs.
Cadbury
In-N-Out
cream
burger.
eggs. In-N-Out burger.
Come on,
Yeah.
like there's nothing better than that.
I just did a deal where I took 20% equity in a business, and in my rider, I said I needed a year's supply of Cadbury cream eggs. And my partner thought I was joking. I actually have a year's supply of Cadbury cream eggs in my prenup.
What the?
That's how serious I am.
That is some nut stuff.
Wow.
Risk versus reward. You got a favorite one? Just get this from
Munchies.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Flamin' Hot Cheetos. I love Sour Patch. Yeah.
Here we go. Zach's. Oh, yeah. Sour Patch is the great one. Zach, you're back. Can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry, my phone's a little wonky. I don't know where I cut off, to be honest.
You were talking about how it's OG Kush for life and something about California. And Jason kind of finished what you were saying, but like, yeah.
Everything I say about market caps, product categories, and Valens Growworks, did that make it through or no?
No.
Oh, fuck, sorry, I must have, my bad. Winding it back, what I was saying before, OG Kush, the nose knows, and I think most connoisseurs consider that like one of the definitive West Coast flower strains. So yeah, even though Maui Wowie classic and I like a land race, I can't remember if Maui Wowie is considered that. What I was saying before, though, sorry, and this was a question kicked to both Jason and Toby. Two things. One was that in California, the underground or quote legacy market is currently 3 times the size of the legal market. And if we were to pass federal reform like the SAFE Act or made gestures toward things like licensed interstate transports, wouldn't we see the market caps of these legal companies immediately increasing and the black market or legacy market start to diminish? And then my second question was, do we think specialized ancillary companies in Canada could take up market share in the US? Because we were talking before how that's not going to happen with these big Canadian players. I see a company like Valens Growworks, which makes industrial grade extraction facilities for THC oil and CBD oil. Vapes and edibles are the fastest growing product categories, whereas beverages are like 1.6% of any legal market. Tiny. I'm curious if a company like Valens, which again is like developing, I think they build out industrial grade extraction facilities. Could a company like that that's specialized in ancillary make a bigger splash in the U.S. markets?
I think Valens is a good company. You know, it's funny because I see Deepak on here. The last time I was in Vegas, I was sitting at a blackjack table with Valens, Deepak, and Bruce Linton. So you just made me think of it.
I invited him up
Look,
to speak if he wants to.
I think, I think that there's gonna be a lot of bureaucracy for a company from Canada to come to the United States. So I think there's going to be just a lot of red tape. They can find a way or a partnership, but you know, it's still going to be very tough. I think it's going to be very tough for any foreign entity to come into the United States, especially on a subject as touchy as this. And just be like, oh, okay, yeah, here. Oh, you know, the United States isn't going to be so welcoming.
So Deepak's
Thank
up
you.
here.
Hey guys, yeah, thanks for having me. Just jumped in the room. Hey Jason, how you doing? Listen, Zach, I mean, I sit on the board of Valens Growworks. There's only so much that I can say publicly. Of course, I'd point you to the Green Roads acquisition that we just completed. And of course, that's U.S. market entry in some ways. I wouldn't necessarily classify Valens as, as a company that builds out facilities. I mean, we certainly have a lot of core competency on toll processing, manufacturing, and extraction, something that we definitely do. So I just thought I would add that element. And I think the company, in my opinion, does a really good job on the Canadian side, much better than its peers. So, I'll probably leave it there with respect to what I can say publicly.
Thanks, Deepak. It's nice to be in touch. And yeah, it's my best performing pot stock by a mile.
That's awesome. Real quick question on a pot stock, one that is popularly owned and may not go anywhere. Who knows? Toby, maybe I'll throw this one over to you. SNDL, any thoughts? I'm getting some comments on it.
Avoid. I mean, so I focus 98% of my attention on the U.S. companies. I don't really care on the Canadian companies. I think Valens actually is a good company. So I think there's select companies. But when you're talking Sundial, I mean, look, I come from an institutional background. Like, I don't mess with penny stocks. I don't really. I mean, whatever. Like, take a flyer on a meme stock, but to me, I just think it's like a meme stock at this point. But I'm not super well informed. I mean, I look at the financials, and for the most part, most of the large Canadian companies, the financials in context of their market cap is kind of a joke.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. I got out of SNDL rather fast. I was not wanting to sit there holding that bag. I don't see that going back up anytime soon. Real quick, risk versus reward. Do you have one more question? Do you want to pose that question to someone?
Yeah, anyone who wants to answer it can, but I'm just curious because we talked a lot about, I mean, you guys seem to agree a lot with what I'm thinking long term, and I'm curious if you guys have a specific U.S. operator that would be your number one, or if you prefer owning the basket. I know even, to Jason who's in and out, do you have a specific that's still your number one? Yeah, that's my question. Is there a specific U.S. operator?
Yeah, I mean, my number one right now is Curaleaf, and then Cresco Labs. All right. I own Green Thumb, Trulieve, TerraSend, Power REIT, and a couple of others, a bunch of stuff that's yet to go public. I mean, it'd be very hard for me to just get in and out with my positions. So something like Curaleaf, my thesis is a $50 stock in 2 years on the assumption that, we get an uplist in that time period, preferably, within the next 12 months. I think like if you're looking at this, like, yeah, you can just buy and hold. That's fine. And that's what I do. I'm just saying like between March and July, take 15-20% and play with it. Or sell 20% of your position in February if it ever hits an all-time high, just as kind of a rule of thumb. But there's a lot of upside for sure, without a doubt. And what Toby was saying before, the way that these companies report, you're going to be able to see exactly what's going on. I mean, guys, Illinois just paid more in taxes than for cannabis than alcohol. So you kind of see where it's going. Like I don't want anybody to think that I'm of the opinion that you get completely out of anything. Now, if you're trading some crap like Sundial, yeah, you get in, get out. But like, there's no way I'm going to blow out of like a 40,000 share position in Curaleaf in a day, just to make a like 50-cent range on it and then try and get into it the next day. Because the one thing that I will tell you, and what I told a lot of people when Curaleaf was under 13, or when TerraSend was close to 9, or when Green Thumb hit 25, when these things decide to go the other way, you're going to miss it, and then you're going to have seller's remorse.
Toby, you got something to add?
Yeah, I mean, Jason and I talk on Curaleaf, so it's kind of my top positions kind of flip back and forth sometimes depending on like when the stocks go down. Like I've just been a buyer. I've only sold one cannabis company. It was a California company, and I just kind of rotated recently into Verano. But I mean, I think like the top company in the world will be Curaleaf. So that is a blue chip. I call them green chips, because it's cannabis. So definitely Curaleaf. I actually have a slightly larger position in Green Thumb right now. But I'd say like if you had to pick two companies to own, you got to pick those two. I met Boris Jordan, the guy that runs Curaleaf, maybe about 2.5 years ago. And like didn't really know him at the time. Like it was one of those meetings. Like my broker was like, "Hey, I want to bring this guy by your office," and like my conference room was actually booked, so we actually met in my private office. Like I had no idea the guy was like a billionaire when he like was escorted in my office. But I think anybody that wants to do research on Curaleaf, just look at Boris's background, look at what he's done in other industries throughout his career. Definitely not a guy you want to bet against. I always say like you want to bet with the billionaires, not against them. So that one, I think one of the things about Curaleaf is it's increasingly clear that they have global aspirations. They just made a small acquisition in Europe, very smart acquisition in my opinion. So I think Curaleaf, I think it's going to continue to be the largest global company in terms of revenue and hopefully soon market cap. So Curaleaf, and then Green Thumb is just, they're just so well operated. The CEO is a rock star. So I don't think you can go wrong with those two companies.
Okay, so then follow up, because I've gotten a very similar response, I think, to most people I've asked this question. So I wonder, do you see a reason to own the ETF, to own advisor shares, when you should just be buying Curaleaf, Green Thumb, Trulieve, etc.?
I mean, I do. I mean, I actually own a decent amount of the ETF as well, and it's mainly just like to get some exposure to like the tier 2 names, to be honest. So I like diversifying. I own 8 MSOs plus the ETF. But like my seventh largest MSO in my portfolio is like maybe like 20% the size of of Green Thumb or something like that. So I mean, I'm heavily overweight the top names. If you believe that if you believe that stocks will get uplisted, I mean, you're going to want to own the biggest names. I mean, that's where all the money's going to go, right? Like these large institutions with hundreds of billions of dollars under management, they're not going to go be searching for like consortium or like these like Planet 13 or something like that, these like microcap names. They're gonna go with the largest, most liquid names. I also think, look, I'm a real estate investor. I invest in apartments, not homes. Like I'm a big believer in scale. So there's just so many advantages that a larger company has over a smaller company. But that being said, I think that you can own some of the MSOS as well for exposure to smaller names. And Jason can probably speak more to this. What MSOS is great for is that there's options. Jason loves to trade the options. I don't yet. He's trying to teach me how to do it, and I'm happy to learn from him. But yeah, I think the ETF is actually good as well.
Sweet.
Yeah,
Awesome.
the options are really where it's at. So when we got this big pullback, and I was just pretty much like, all right, I'm full. Like I've got enough of the stock. Where could I get the most bang for my buck here? So I started buying November and January calls. So
I did the exact same.
Yeah. So I bought $41 calls and I bought $55 January calls. And, the money spent in there, had I put it into, let's say, Curaleaf or Green Thumb, or really, just pick a name off of this bottom, if I put that same amount of money in, it's like nothing compared. So it's like Green Thumb went up 16%. My option went 30%. So that's why I use the option. But to Toby's point, if you don't want to invest in all of these, lower, these tier 2, tier 3 companies that MSOS holds, then you get the basket. I mean, it's weighted, 10% in the top 3 names anyway.
Perfect. I think that we are going to wrap up shortly. We've been going for a little bit over an hour. I feel like we covered some really good topics. To my speakers, one thing that I would let you know is that I posted, like I said, a question, just what thoughts do you have on the cannabis industry? And we actually got several questions that we might not have time to get to. So I'll just tag you all on that thread. And if you do have any time to answer some of those questions, I'm sure that they would really appreciate it. I guess just closing thoughts. Maybe if we could just do kind of 1 minute per speaker, just closing thoughts on this industry, what you want people to take away. We'll start with you, Jason.
Sure. You've got to look at it like any emerging industry. Look at it like alcohol after prohibition. or when the automobile was introduced. You know, you had lots and lots of companies that came out, you know, and now you've got like, you know, 4 automakers. You've got like, you know, 5 spirit companies for the most part. There is going to be a consolidation in this sector when legalization happens. You know, use what happened in Canada as the model, and you know, trade responsibly and stay active. That's it.
Absolutely. Also, Deepak, you can feel free. He asked if you could pin a tweet. You can feel free to pin the tweet. We're going to be closing in a few minutes, but if you want people to go ahead and see that, that would be great. Also, shout out to Twitter investors for being on here. I think that he might have some spotty service, but we've been doing, honestly, my brother feels like we've been collaborating on so many spaces over the last week. I've probably spent like a good 10 hours, I feel like, in spaces over the last 4 days with this guy. So check out Twitter investors and what he's doing. And some of the finance merch that he makes is awesome. Maybe you got to make some weed merch. All right, Toby, any or Twitter investors, any closing, anything you'd like to say?
Yeah,
Oh,
I think
real quick, Twitter,
Go ahead,
Twitter
go ahead.
investors. Then we'll go to you, Toby,
Oh.
after.
No, I was just gonna say this is a super interesting space. I've never actually, well, I actually owned a little bit of Tilray like years ago, but super interesting. You guys should keep it up, and yeah, I love the spaces that have been going on. Like I don't know, spaces are so addicting, even though Twitter is really addicting.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Toby.
yeah. I mean, look, I again, like I'm like kind of like Jason, you know, really focused on the U.S. names, right? Like I know people, this is called the cannabis industry, and a lot of times, like, I mean, I get it. Like most retail investors, you know, there's a lot of like interest in the Canadian names. There's interest in the Canadian names and then ancillary names, right? Like Grow Generation, IIPR, Weed Maps, etc. And you know, like I think the best opportunity is the U.S. names. It's good because these companies like Curaleaf and Green Thumb are finally starting to get more traction and more media appearances. So like the CEOs are on Bloomberg or CNBC more often, and I think that's a really good thing for them to get more exposure. And so I really encourage everybody to obviously do your own due diligence, but look into the top U.S. companies. And look, earnings season's right around the corner. Curaleaf earnings is next Monday. You know, just look at the earnings and the revenue and earnings that these companies are going to be posting. Check it out, and then you know, obviously regulatory reform is there's a back and forth over there going on, and that creates volatility in the space. Use the volatility to your advantage and accumulate some of these positions.
Perfect. Love that takeaway. Risk versus reward. You got your 1 minute wrap up.
No need for a minute. Just this is not an if to me. It's a when, and I think that's the same agreement with the majority of the speakers. Legalization's coming. I don't know how fast it's going to happen. I don't need it to happen right away. Like they said, I think the longer it takes actually benefits a lot of us. You know, my dad asked, he has a broker at Morgan Stanley, asked to invest in marijuana stocks on my advice, and he wasn't allowed to. Just that alone is enough for me to say we're early, and it's not an if, but a when.
Got it. And Zach, you want to take us home?
Yeah, totally. I agree. It's not an if, it's but a when. And again, to remember, the legal market in California is 1/3 the size of the legacy or quote underground market. So once we see policy reform on a federal level, I imagine market caps will be across the board exponentially higher than even some people are predicting currently. I think Toby said 500 billion before. Like that's 100% on the money to me. I think it's not overly optimistic. And it's a really exciting time. You know, as a consumer, I typically like to spend my money with mom and pops and the more like craft cannabis brands. But as a retail and capital investor, like I still would rather invest in quote unquote big weed than alcohol or big tobacco, even though that said, I do have Afria related investments. It just feels nice to be able to support something that I've been a personal champion and enthusiast of for so long. And I can't wait to see what the future holds. Always jail the feds, free the feds.
Love it. So thank you to everyone who, both to my speakers, you know, you're really key parts to this industry. I recommend to my listeners, if this is an industry that you are interested in, that you are passionate about, that you want to make money in, go ahead and check out my speakers. We just heard from them for only an hour, but there's so much more. That's what I like to say with these spaces. It's an opportunity to get to understand the insights that people hold. But if you really want to learn the whole thing, give them a follow, check out their content, interact with them daily. I know that Jason runs a lot of stuff on YouTube as well. I think he's going to be live streaming later about some small caps. So there's really just a ton to go down the road. Zach is an incredible writer. I retweeted an article that he put up, but I'm not sure if it was by him, but he has many other articles inside of Bullish. And if you're enjoying the spaces curation, again, this is pretty much my full-time job nowadays, is putting these together. I spend like, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 hours a week in spaces. The rest of the time is basically putting these together, trying to put together content for y'all. So if you enjoy, you can come and check out the Wolfpack as well, hang out with me. But that's going to be all today. Thank you so much, everyone. And I hope you all have a very enjoyable rest of your day. And if you partake in cannabis, enjoy that. See you, speakers.